What's your emergency? 911, what's your emergency?
Be advised, Car 4 has control of the pursuit. Proceed with caution.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Behind the Crime Door. How's everybody doing on this wonderful Saturday night? I hope everybody's well. Hey, Polygraph, how are you? Hey, Maria, it's good to see you, my dear. Hey, help me, Rhonda. Yeah, it's kind of snowy over here in Illinois, too. Hey, John, how are you? So good to have you guys with me tonight. I hope we have a a really good show. I put together a really good little, I don't know, presentation on junk science. So I hope to educate us a little bit on some of the forensic evidence topics surrounding Delphi. There's a lot of stuff to unpack there, I'll tell you. Hey, Tech Death. How are you, my dear? Hey, Melissa. Good to see you. So we're going to talk about that. We're going to go over body language a little bit if I have time. There's a lot to cover tonight, so if it starts getting late, then I may save the body language stuff for another live stream. But yeah, just a lot to talk about. Hey, Karen Perez, how are you? It's good to see you here. Sorry, I'm just trying to get all my stuff in a row here. So that I have everything. How are you doing, Dave? Just waiting for folks to come on in. But anyway, so anything crazy new going on that you guys oh, Melissa, thank you. Thank you. Hoosier and I had a good time. It's all good. I know things got a little heavy and light, or light and heavy there for a little bit. Between us, it seemed, I guess, to some, but we're fine. I love to discuss things with him. I like the fact that we can throw off different ideas. Excuse me. Even if we don't always agree with one another, we still remain respectful of one another. So yeah, I had a really good time. And what I really wanted to say about that live is I really hadn't planned for him and I to really debate like we ended up doing. But I think that the things that we did talk about and the things that we covered are all of the things that are going to come out in court. These are all the questions that are running around in everyone's minds and heads about this case. These are the things that have people wondering what's going on. And these are the things that people are talking about amongst themselves with everyone else. You can see it when you watch live streams. Hey, Verbal, how are you doing, my dear? And so, that was one of the great things about that live with him, was that we were able to kind of show you what the arguments are going to be like in court and what's going to come of that, and how is that going to be handled, so wild. I had a really good day today. I had a really crappy headache last night, and not so good of an evening, but I was able to get through that. But today I've been feeling really good. So, but we're going to do a missing person first. I was going to hang on just one second. I want to look and see if I can find something first. Hold on. It'd help if you spelled it right, Kristen. I think it's time to cut my nails. They're just a bit too long. Okay. Sorry, guys. Give me just a minute. Okay, guys, I think I'm back. Steve, I sent you a link. You're welcome to hop on with me. That is so crazy. I have not had any of that at all. I don't know where that came from. I'm fine, you guys. Just coughing. Yeah, just a little bit of a breathing thing, but I'm all good. I promise. I'm good. Dave, thank you so much. I appreciate it. I appreciate it so much. Thank you. Yeah, verbal. just just a little one, but I'm okay. It did make me cry, but I'm fine. I'm sorry, guys. Not the way I expected to start the show. I apologize. But Steve from True Crime Web, I did send you a link, my dear. I texted it to you. So feel free to jump on with me. That would be great. I would love to have you on for this one anyway. Oh, okay. Never mind. I'll send it to you. I'll email it to you. Just a minute. Hang on, guys. Just give me a second to get this over to him. Oh. Okay, my dear, I did get it sent over to you. Oh, you guys are so nice. Yeah, he's my savior. Steve is my savior. He's such a great guy. I just love him. Thanks, Dave. I don't smoke, I promise. With asthma, that's never a good thing, right? There he is. He is so quick to come to my aid. Oh. Oh, you guys are so sweet and wonderful. Hey, Steve.
Hello. How are you?
I'm okay.
What's the topic? And you, I, I'm
I'm
open. You just tell
I'm
me what
good.
we need.
Uh, I've got a we're gonna talk about junk science tonight with forensics.
I love junk
So we're
science.
gonna talk, yeah, great. And we're gonna talk a little bit about body language as well. And and
Okay.
so in reference to obviously Richard Allen, but we're gonna
All right.
talk about there's just been a lot of stuff with people talking about junk science around the forensic evidence that's in this case. So I thought it would be a good idea to talk about junk science and where it comes from, how long it's been, this term junk science has
Mhm.
been around, and I've got a little presentation on it. So
Okay.
that's all, and I'm thrilled to have you because being you're the forensic mind that I love. You will
Okay.
definitely be able to give us a lot of information.
Well, recently on the Murdoch trial that is occurring in South Carolina currently, some of the junk science that we'll be facing with Richard Allen is being discussed and was a expert was qualified earlier this week in the trial on the firearms of the exact issues that are facing Richard Allen's firearm. His unspent round is being discussed um, or will be discussed in the trial in South Carolina. That expert was able to go in there and talk about unspent rounds and during his qualifications and how he was part of the studies to determine that you can use from his opinions that it's not junk science, and the court agreed with him and
Mhm.
said that that would be allowed in there. And so a lot of people may claim that it is junk science, and the defense attorneys often call it that. But the court says
No.
no, that
Right.
no, there's a basis for this.
Yeah.
And I almost broke out laughing when that attorney asked the expert in South Carolina, "Are you aware of certain studies?" And the expert said, "I participated in those studies," which is not anything you ever want the judge to hear or a jury to hear. You don't want to um, tell the world and let them know that you're talking to one of the founding members of that science and understands it far greater than most people.
Right.
And it's just opinions, but still it'll be argued.
Mhm.
And a lot of times the juries just throw it out that well, they're going to hire their own gun, hired gun that's going to say it's junk science, and then you
Right.
have the experts that says no, it's good. And a lot of juries sometimes just weigh it out and say, okay.
One of the things that reminded me a little bit about this is if you remember in the Casey Anthony case, they had the smell test of what was being smelled in the trunk of the car, and that was something that was extremely new. They had never had that stuff in court before, and that was allowed. And there was a lot of people that thought that that was junk science, that there was no way that you could tell, especially that long later, what was in the trunk of that car by smell.
Yeah. And that, even, um, and you have to understand that there is a lot of smells out there because even the animals will false alert on certain things. I think one of the things that they found up in the Alaska area and anyone's home that's ever been ransacked by a bear, that it tears the refrigerators apart because some of the insulation has a smell of something that they like. that they want to get to. It is not the product, but it has a similar smell to something, and I can't remember what that was. But it makes them tear the insulation out of refrigerators, and because they alert on it, and it's all due to that smell. And so, yes, when you get down to smells, I can understand that. Yes, there might be some disqualifiers on that.
Yeah, for sure. So the first thing I'm going to do that I wanted to do tonight was I wanted to show my missing person. And there's very little on her, but I just still want people to be aware. So I'm going to share my screen, you guys, and let's look at her. This is Jacarla Parker. She went missing December 19th of 2022. She is missing from Buffalo, New York. She was born on December 23rd, 2006. So she went missing right before her birthday. She's female. She's Black. She has brown hair, brown eyes. She's 5'2" and 131 pounds. She has not been heard of at all since that date. And the Buffalo Police Department is asking for anyone with any information to please call 911 or call 1-800-THE-LOST or 1-716-853-2222, which is the Buffalo Police Department. So that's Jacarla, and we hope that she is found safe soon. I can't imagine what her parents are going through, not knowing where she is. Just another missing. I mean, there's so many. So we hope for her safe return, and I will keep an eye on her case, you guys, so that we can follow what's happening there. So that is the missing person for this evening. And then I wanted to just touch on, I don't know if you guys have heard of him, but this is who we're going to be talking about later in the show tonight. But Joe Navarro is a international best-selling author, and an expert of body language. He's probably one of the most world-renowned experts in body language. He is a former FBI agent. And Joe was known, he started out as an agent as catching spies. And he tells his story. I've watched him on TED Talks. I've watched videos. He's just amazing. And you see him a lot on all of the talk news stations like CNN and, MSNBC, Fox. They all have him on as an expert in body language. And he has some really interesting things to talk about, but he spent 25 years in the FBI catching spies. He was a police officer when the FBI approached him. He was only 23 years old, and he accepted their offer to come work for them. And he is, like I said, he's just world renowned in this. And one of the stories that he tells, and I thought this was an interesting aspect, but they were looking for an international spy in New York City. And the guy that they were following had gone into a flower shop. And they said that he was just your run-of-the-mill guy. Nothing, really stood out to them about him, about this person. But they were watching him, and they had him on surveillance. And as they were watching the surveillance of him, and he came walking out of that flower shop, and Joe told them to stop the tape and roll it back. And they played it again. And he said, right there, he's our guy. He's the guy we're looking for. And they were like, how do you know that from what you just saw? He came out of the flower shop holding the flowers upside down by the stems. And that's how they carry them in Eastern Europe. And he knew that. instantly. So when they got the guy into the interrogation room and they were interrogating him, and Joe went in there, he goes, "Do you want to know how we know it's you?" And he said, "The flowers." And he said, and right then and there, the guy he basically just crumbled, and he knew he was caught. But I thought that was kind of interesting because all of us, and he talks about how all of us do certain things. All of us have a certain body language, the way we walk, the way we use our hands when we talk, the way we shake hands, the way we, like sitting in a movie theater with our arms crossed, giving ourselves a hug. This is a hug. He said for years, people have thought that if you stand with your arms like this, talking to someone, you're closed off. He said that's not true. He said this is somebody who's giving themselves comfort. They feel a little uncomfortable with whatever they're doing, so they're kind of comforting themselves. It's just he's just really interesting, and I really think that you guys might want to check him out. He has a YouTube channel. He also has a website. I'm going to drop his website in here into the chat. So if you guys, and I'll also have it in the description box below. But you can go check him out. There's a really cool video that he has. I thought we would watch later if we have time, but we'll see. So, there was an article posted in the Atlantic in July of 2022, and it was talking about forensics and the solvability of crimes in this country, and how there's 6 basic reasons that this person who wrote the article states is why murder clearance rate is at an all-time low. And most of you who follow my channel know that I've talked a lot about this last year, about the fact that Indiana is 48th out of 50 states in their murder clearance rate. They have got a lot of work to do in that department, in that state. But with that being said, I also don't want to be flippant. I've got a very wonderful law enforcement officer sitting here next to me tonight, and he knows it's not as easy as it sounds. And a lot of these cases can be very hard and difficult. And I was thinking today when I was looking at this and how I've been so critical of murder rates and that statistic. But when you look at forensics, and if you look at what we're going to be talking about tonight with forensics and then junk science and all of that, all of these things taken together can have an impact on solving cases. How people view things and view science in general. But for the past 60 years, the United States detectives have gotten worse at what they consider one of the most basic jobs of law enforcement. And this particular article talks about the fact that American violence is resurging. And I think we all know that. I think if we watch any kind of, television, we can tell that violence is surging, and especially in our country. Gun murders rose to their highest figure on record in 2020. And that was the last year that they have complete data on. And while the violent crime in this country is rising, the America's police departments are struggling more than ever. They're struggling because they don't have the manpower. They're struggling because they don't have the funding necessary in so many instances to hire the manpower that they need. And they're struggling to bring these perpetrators to justice. And we need to be mindful of why that is and not just be so quick to blame the police departments. Because again, police are funded by us. The police are funded by our taxes, and our taxes locally, wherever it is that you live, you are responsible for your police department. So when you go to the voting booth and you're voting for these politicians, and the first thing they want to cut when they take office is the police and the fire departments, because that's their big overhead of their budgets, of their local budgets. It's not always in the best interest of their community. And so in 1960, more than 90% of all homicides were cleared by police with an arrest or the identification of a dead suspect. The clearance rate has declined in each of the past 6 decades, which makes you wonder what's going on. Our technology has gotten better. Everything is better than what we had in the 1960s, is it not, Steve?
Well, we're talking about two different ideologies. There was a time in our history that when a law enforcement officer spoke to you or you were seated on a jury, that they were above reproach, that what they told you was the truth. There was no ifs, ands, or buts. You never doubted. My father's generation of officers, that when they put someone in jail, they were there, they had done wrong, they were guilty. And so that played a certain part. And now we have sciences that allows that you just can't put someone in jail on a eyewitness's testimony. And a lot of people went to prison. Some of them lost their lives due to testimony by eyewitnesses, which have been over the years proven how many times wrong.
Yeah.
People will, yes, that's the person that did it. I saw him. And of course, they paid the ultimate price. And is that right? We find out with DNA now that no. I think, and there is a loss of investigative skills. And I've seen it, and I hate it when you have all of these confidential informants, and officers rely so much upon those to get convictions. And I hate that part of it. I like the hunting predator characteristics of investigating, going out there and getting those clues and going and getting the bad guy. And I do believe that it is a certain part is lost due to all the confidential and how investigators approach it now. But the CSI, if you leave that DNA, absolutely, they're going to get you. And we see how that is going, because they're going and solving cases now that are 40 and 50 years ago, that during that golden years that law enforcement couldn't solve it just on their word, but they're going back and solving those cases from 40 and 50 years ago now. Just on DNA, which is wonderful.
It's awesome. It's awesome that they kept the evidence. That's what's so awesome, is that it's not gotten lost or whatever. The most recent data available from the FBI, the clearance rate has hit an all-time low of just over 50%, which means that half of the murders in the United States go unsolved. We're, to try to understand the driving, like, long-term decline in the clearance rate and why police seem so bad at solving new murders, you have to look at everything, and you can't just look at one item, just like you said. I mean, there's a number of different things going on here. And when the FBI calculates the clearance rate, according to Jeff Asher, who is an expert on this, he's a crime analyst that does this kind of analysis on clearance rates. The denominator in is murders in a given year, and the numerator is the number of murders that were solved either by arrest or by exception. An exception means that they've identified the murderer, but for whatever reason, they can't arrest that person because it's murder-suicide, or the person died a decade ago, or the killer is already in prison in another state. So he said in the last 2 decades, when we have no reason to suspect that there's been any change in how the data has been reported, we still see a decline. And it's a real trend that police agencies are reporting fewer and fewer murders being cleared each year. And he said most people would agree that you should not rely on the 1960 data, or really much of the 1970 data. Hundreds of cities were reporting a 90 to 100% clearance rate, but these places probably weren't solving anywhere close to this many murders. He said he's seen statistics showing that before the 1970s, it was very common for police agencies dealing with lots of murders to claim they'd solved practically all of them. And today, the number of agencies claiming that is basically zero. Were the 1960 numbers a total fabrication because police were throwing innocent people in jail, or because they were making up statistics to report to the FBI to make themselves look better? It's probably both, he says. But in the pre-Miranda era, the 60s, the 50s, the 40s, police departments had a lot less scrutiny on them, and it was very hard to say what percentage of their arrests were bad arrests or what percentage of them were bad exceptions. So you have to think of that. And so because of Miranda that happened in 1966, it's the U.S. Supreme Court case, Miranda versus Arizona, the Supreme Court ruled in that case that the Fifth Amendment guarantees citizens certain rights where they're being questioned by the police. And this led to the famous norm of what everyone knows as the Miranda rights. And you have the right to remain silent. And so the question was put to Asher, how important is Miranda in explaining the declining clearance rate? And Miranda improved the rights of many people who may or may not be innocent. And you can see that if you look at the years before Miranda, you have a 90% murder clearance rate. And after Miranda, there's a 20% decline. So it was clearly an important factor. But if it was the only factor, you would have expected the clearance rate to fall off a cliff, and it didn't. It was a gradual decline. So I thought that was kind of interesting. And the question was posed to him, how much of this is about guns? He talks a lot about that, but I really don't want to get into too much of that. But he said, firearm murders are much harder to solve. He said, because they take place from farther away, you often have fewer witnesses. And there's usually less physical evidence. Do you agree with that, Steve?
Oh man, that is, I've worked them all from, from firearms to knives, so further away. No, I mean, we were very fortunate, and there's a thing called smoking gun homicides, which means that when you get there, you obviously know who the gun is literally smoking, and so they're easy to solve. He's on the scene. Some of the whodunit, some of them, we had one where it happened in a vehicle, and the airbag solved it from a firearm. The DNA transfer from when the airbag exploded. Guy tried to do a James Bond escape by wrecking the vehicle and let the airbags deploy, and then he's going to escape. Failed to do so, and almost worked, but failed. And but the airbag was able to get DNA profile to solve that case. But if it hadn't been in that car, then very likely, yes, we probably wouldn't have solved that one. But I was very lucky in my career. Of the homicides that occurred that we had, was very high. I'm trying to think, did we have an unsolved one during my career? I had retired and then they had one. So I was very fortunate in my career not to have that experience.
They talk about number 4, which is higher standards from district attorneys and juries. Is it possible that in the age of DNA evidence and true crime podcasts and CSI shows, and juries expect more physical evidence now, which raises the bar for the detectives working the cases? Has the evidence standard increased in the last few decades? And
I would agree. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And rightly so, because we don't want to put people in jail that doesn't meet a high standard.
Yes. And Asher said, he thinks he agrees. It makes complete sense. He says he wanted to be clear, though, that the clearance rate has nothing to do with whether the DA accepts the charges, but prosecutors want to win. And if they've been refuted by jurors because the bar is higher, it would make sense that their reluctance gets passed down to the police. Cops are less likely to make an arrest if they don't think they have the evidentiary base that the DA is going to accept. And that said, we don't have great data to know for sure if this is a big deal, but it does seem likely. And I just wondered how you felt about that as an officer, and you're investigating a case. Are you constantly in the back of your mind thinking, is this enough? Is the DA going to think this is enough? Do we need more? Or do
I've
we
been
have
there.
to, yeah.
Been there. Especially, I worked a cold case, and we made great leaps on the cold case, and I retired unfortunately on that cold case. Happened before. It happened only early in my career when I was on the road, but there at the end, I was. The other investigators were gone that had worked the original case, and it was many years later, and we worked a cold case on it. And I absolutely believe to this day, I know who the offender is, and we just don't have enough evidence. We took it and presented it to the district attorney and said, this is what we got. He says, sounds good, sounds great, but I'm not going to prosecute unless, and we get further evidence. And so I've been there. Yes, that just because law enforcement thinks it's a great case, that prosecutor will not take it unless they have more than what I thought was necessary, and doesn't want to risk it. And rightly so, because they only get one chance at this. That if you take that offender who has a great case against him, but it's not enough to absolutely prosecute him and convince a jury, you don't get that shot again. You only get one chance. So I understood. I hated it, and I still hate it to this day because on that one cold case there that I looked at that we worked and took to the prosecutor, he said no, and I still argue the point though that it was him, and I still believe it to this day that yes, that's him, but at some point, hopefully in the future, other evidence is found and they're able to prosecute him.
I wanted to, thanks for that insight, because I think that, that it really helps people to understand that are watching, people that are listening, when they actually hear it from someone who has that experience.
Oh, it's frustrating.
It's so much easier to put or wrap our minds around it when we hear it coming from you.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and I found out, I'm new here to the true crime world, and it's so easy to just instantly, as a channel creator out there, to say, so-and-so did it. No ifs, ands, or buts. They did it. They're guilty of it. Well, you're not the one that's prosecuting it. You're not the one that's footing the bill. You're not the one that has to lose the case and be forever judged, such as what the prosecutor would be. And you don't know all the evidence and why you can't consider such a person.
And that some of the evidence you have may not be admissible.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, you just don't know what's going to happen when you get into court.
Yeah. And it's so, like I said, it's so easy for us to cast people throw them under the bus, and it shouldn't be that way.
I wanted to bring up, because we're going to get into this junk science thing, and I do have a presentation I want to go over, and we can stop and discuss it as I go. But in May of 2017, Patrick Pursley was a man who was acquitted of murder in Rockford, Illinois. He had been imprisoned for 24 years for the shooting death of Andy Asher. And he has now been absolved of that 1993 crime because the ballistics used to convict him proved to be wrong. And, there's a lot of people out there that believe that we do have, and you've already offered this as truth. We all know this. There are people who are convicted on evidence every day in this country that are not guilty. I think that some of the evidence that we have going back, now you have to realize this was back in 2017, he was acquitted and he'd been in prison for almost 24 years. Again, this is predating DNA. This is and ballistics has been around for a long time, 100 years, right? Am I correct in saying that?
Oh, I believe so. It's been close to that. But now you have to understand now that just because and that he's innocent of this crime doesn't mean that there was other circumstances that put him in that boat. There was other things, character.
That made him look guilty.
Yes, there were other things that played a part in this, that they just didn't go get the altar boy and said, "You're it." That there was other things that contributed to that conviction.
Right.
And they were wrong. But I'm not saying that it was justified under those circumstances, but it's those things that have led us to a higher standard, which is great. Now we're at a higher standard and we're going to live with these numbers forever. And it should be a higher standard. We shouldn't be putting innocent people in jail just because they meet certain criteria that, if he's not guilty of this crime, he's guilty of other crimes. I'm not saying that. That's wrong. But that is part of the things that got a lot of those older cases of people being in prison, is that some of those jurors would look at it in that manner and say, if he didn't do it, he deserves to be in jail anyway. And that's not the right way of approaching it.
He talks about, in his case, the fact that he represented himself in this appeal to try to get his case overturned from prison. He lobbied the Illinois lawmakers to pass a law allowing the ballistics in his case to be retested using technology that was not available when he was convicted. So the Integrated Ballistic Identification System, or IBIS, uses much higher resolution now and multi-dimensional images for ballistics analysis, and ultimately matches shell casings to guns. And they didn't have that system back when he was arrested. So he felt confident that if they re-examined the evidence, that he would be proven innocent, and he was.
Good for him.
But what I wanted to say was, without that technology, matching bullets to firearms, it requires an expert to manually compare casings from a crime scene to shell casings that have been test fired from a gun using microscopes. And at the time that Pursley was arrested, the microscopes weren't as strong as they are today. Things get better. Technology gets better. And so I just want everybody to keep in mind, when we're talking about this topic of junk science, things get better with time. Look what happened with DNA. We didn't have DNA. We have a lot of crimes that are unsolved to this day, and all they need is to have the evidence retested with DNA and use the DNA technology that we have. John Benet Ramsey is one of them, and they're trying to get that done now in Colorado. They want to go back and retest some of this evidence using the new DNA technology that we have in place today.
Yeah. When I first started my career, one of the biggest tests was secretor, non-secretor. That was the normal terminology, that you were either a secretor or non-secretor, and that's how they included or excluded you from a crime.
Right. No, exactly. So I know, I'm going to bring this up, but I know that a lot of us have heard of what happened in Memphis with Tyree Nichols, and it's everywhere now. And we've all seen or had the chance or opportunity to see the video. I made a community post yesterday about it. It took me quite a while to watch everything. I was so upset by what I was seeing. I couldn't process it, so it took me a little bit to watch it. But I just want to touch on this a little bit, and say, first of all, this young man was a photographer, and he actually had a website. He loved photography. That was his passion. And he was coming home that night from actually taking photographs of the sunset, which is something that he did every day. And I want you guys to make sure that you check out, I just dropped it in the chat, but that is his website. And it sounds like he was just an amazing person. And I'm really horrifically sorry about what happened to him. And we see this a lot, and I don't want us to become numb to it, to where it's just another one of those stories, and just another one of the many, I just want justice for this young man and for his family. And I am very happy today to see that from what I can tell, there's not been a lot of violence that has happened since the release of these videos, which I hope continues to be where we are headed with this. But anyway, my heart goes out to Tyree's mother and his stepfather, his family, his friends. And I just can't tell you how awful that whole story is. And Steve, I know that you as a police officer, that is not something that you would condone.
Absolutely.
But what are your thoughts on that whole scenario? Do you have any publicly that you feel comfortable sharing? Or
Sure. Yeah. The system failed. I mean, of all the evil in the world that's out there and all the crimes that are being committed, you can find an individual that in law enforcement, that if you are out there and you're hunting the most evil among, is not in a traffic stop and some kid that may have some minor infraction, you're trying to make some type of drug arrest for some minor incursion. That is not where you go. You go into those neighborhoods, because I guarantee you, in their jurisdiction, there are places where a child or a woman can't walk the street safely. Go to those areas and find those evil bad guys that are not allowing. If you want to go out and put yourself in a frontline position to have an impact, looking for some minor traffic incursion is not the place to be. There's plenty of places in law enforcement in every community that there's bad, evil people. Go find them. And if you want to have an impact, and these guys, they're going to have the full weight of the government placed upon them, rightly so. If, from the facts that we currently know, they overstep their bounds and they'll be held accountable for it, which is good.
Yeah, for sure. And what angers me every time this happens, because I have law enforcement officers in my family, I have detectives in my family that go out there, and that go out there every day and put their life on the line for our safety. And it gives officers like that bad names, because it makes people start thinking horrible things about the police. And, you see that, and that's what people start thinking. And it's not. I mean, there are good police officers out there, and there are people out there that are still wanting to be police officers, that want to do good and actually not do miscarriages of justice. These guys seem to me as just thugs that were carrying a badge.
Yeah, they're no better than the street gangs.
Exactly.
I mean,
That's
they
how
acted like a street gang.
Yeah.
I mean, and it's what it is.
Yeah.
There's no hiding behind it. If you have this mentality that's allowed, I don't even know if I would go into the profession now, and that's sad.
Mm-hmm.
Because I went into a profession that I'm a second generation. I'm very proud of the impact I had. And, every shift I went on, and we went out there, we said, okay, where's the trouble going to start tonight? And because you knew where the drugs were. And if you want to go and stop drug sales, go park yourself on that corner where they sell dope and anger the drug dealers. And it's not that hard to do. and,
Right.
and
Yes,
have an
they are
impact.
investigating the EMTs as well. That was the other thing that I thought was so horrific about this. It wasn't just the officers. After they did their horrific thing, the first responders that were supposed to be the medical personnel there to help him weren't even doing what they were supposed to be doing. And so they're investigating them as well. And I'm just like, complete breakdown. Something's going on in Memphis. I don't know. I would be demanding a complete investigation of what happened there.
Sadly, it's not just Memphis. I mean, we
No,
have
I
so
know.
many metropolitan areas that have that these issues. And what is the final answer? I ain't got no idea. How do you? What agency will it take to police the police? And
Yeah,
they're going to have to figure out something.
exactly.
Because if society loses all respect for law enforcement,
Whew.
what is the eventuality of what that will become? That
We'll
when
be
you
back
can't,
to the Wild West.
Yeah.
People will be carrying their own weapons and taking care of their own justice, their own way.
Yes, and I can't argue against that now.
I'm
For
like,
the fact
that's
that we
just
see
what it'll
law
be.
enforcement, that the law enforcement officers that, you tell your wife and your kids that, okay, if blue lights come on, we don't know if it is a law enforcement officer or not, and they may be harmed or could come to you if you stop immediately. So you continue until you're in a safe place. But then what if you are stopped by one of these renegades, that he's an officer, but he has no respect for what he swore to protect and uphold, that you're stopped by such of the gang members. And so what's the end of it? And I don't know what the final decision will be and how you, but I know we can't continue along this path. Something has to happen.
Right. I totally agree with you. And like I said, I just wanted to bring him up just because he's in the news. His story is so horrific. And I'm going to be definitely following that case closely. I hope that justice is definitely served.
Well, it will be. I mean, I think, once it's made public, this is 5 of how many thousands of other officers that have the same mentality, and they're out there.
Yeah.
That will absolutely enter the service for their own advancement and for their own thrills. And I just don't understand that mentality.
Yeah, I definitely don't either. I'm like, I just don't get it. But it is, I guess, where we are with today's society.
Well, something's got to be corrected because, like I said, once you lose the backing of the good, honest citizens, and they can't argue on your behalf, criminals have won, and the criminals may be wearing badges too.
Right, and that's the scary part, right?
Yeah.
because
I work with guys that threw their career away that went and served federal time. And I thought, my goodness, that's what type of life, why in the world did you even become a law enforcement officer if you was going to throw your whole career away? Yeah.
Right.
And it's always been individuals that did that, but it just seems so dominant now.
Yeah. Hold on one second, Steve. I'm just, I had this pulled up and it has disappeared off my screen and I don't know why. So hold on a second.
Well, if you don't know why, I can most definitely tell you, I don't know why.
Yeah, I'm like, where did it go? I found it though, but I'm like, that did not make
Yeah.
me.
Yeah.
That made me worried a minute because I'm like, hey, there we go. Okay. So I have the stuff I need, guys. Don't you panic. I'm good. Let's get this presentation up on the screen. Oh, heck.
All I know is don't hit the big red button.
Yeah, don't hit that big red button.
That's it.
All right. So bear with me, guys. I threw this together in like not as probably as well as I should, but hopefully you can follow along with me. Because I do want to talk about the fact that forensic science isn't junk science. Now, what is junk science? I will tell you that the expression of junk science is used to describe scientific data or research or analysis considered by the person using that phrase to be spurious or fraudulent. This concept is often invoked in political and legal context where facts and scientific results have a greater amount of weight in making a determination, and it usually conveys a pejorative connotation that the research has been untowardly driven by political, ideological, financial, or otherwise unscientific motives. Just so you guys know, junk science was the expression or concept was popularized in the 90s. And it was in relation to expert testimony in civil litigations. More recently, though, it's been invoking the concept has been a tactic to criticize research on the harmful environmental or public health effects of corporate activities. And occasionally, in response to such criticism, there's an author, Dan Agin, who wrote a book, Junk Science, and where he harshly criticized those who deny the basic premise of global warming. In some contexts, junk science is counterposed to the sound science or solid science that favors one's own point of view. And junk science has in recent years been criticized for undermining public trust in real science. There is some history that the phrase junk science appears to have been used prior to 1985. The United States Department of Justice report by the Tort Policy Working Group noted that the use of such invalid scientific evidence, commonly referred to as junk science, has resulted in findings of causation, which simply cannot be justified or understood from the standpoint of the current state of credible scientific or medical knowledge. So that's basically where junk science originated from. And of course, there are many, things that we could talk about of where that falls, what is considered to be actual junk science. What I'm going to be talking about, or we're going to be going over, is how do we reverse the legacy of junk science in the courtroom? Because believe it or not, statisticians are on a mission to bring rigor to fingerprints, ballistics, and other pattern evidence. These things have been thought to have been part of the problem in the courtroom as junk science. Fingerprints, tire treads, bite marks, bullet marks, and shoe prints. All of these things have at one point or another been argued as being junk science. Still to this day, there's people do not trust bite mark evidence. Steve, did you want to address any of those?
No, I'm having so much fun with that picture that you have there.
Which one?
The one with the that has the junk science. I'm writing down a bunch of stuff on it.
Oh, okay. Yay.
But the one that of him that you, when you introduced it, you have that one. When I saw that, this is an absolutely staged picture. You got a guy with a fingerprint brush that has no powder on it because there's no spillover on the unspent shell of the rifle rounds for a pistol. And you have an unspent rifle round, and you have a spent pistol round. And this is the junkiest scientist processing crime scene stuff I've ever seen. And I was just having fun with that while you were talking.
Oh, okay. Well, that's great. I'm thrilled. I'm glad I made you laugh. I'm glad that you can find all the stuff that's wrong with the photo. That's awesome.
But yeah, I just saw that and I said, okay, while she's talking, I'm just going to have fun with her picture.
There you go.
But now, what was the question?
The question about these items being part of what is argued in court as being junk science.
Oh,
bite marks, tire treads, bullet marks, shoe prints, and even fingerprints.
If they have identifiable characteristics that can only occur and it has a certain pattern to it and certain measurements, then of course that is not junk science. It is, and there's also stuff like with the Kohlberger that they're going to be able to, where those tire tracks out in the road that they're looking at, they're going to analyze those compounds and be able to take it to a lab, and they only occur. And until I did some recent research on it, I didn't realize that tires compounds change as they're being driven, and so that within a certain window, each tire on that vehicle will create a certain compound characteristic that's identifiable. And you know, science is moving, and if they can get it into the courts and recognize, and they will. I mean, science is going to be, and always has been the case. It's what the future is based upon, and we're moving that way. And at all the sciences, at one point, fingerprint identification would have been called junk science.
Right.
DNA in the early years was called junk science.
Yep, exactly.
And so all these examples you have here now are going to be in the early stages, and as we move forward, referred to as junk science.
Yep.
But at some point,
it will not become. It will not be junk science.
Yes, correct. And you know, the biggest identifier about the bite marks, because bite marks came in and was greatly argued with Bundy.
Yes.
And the one of the most telling things when I watched law enforcement in one of his documentaries is that when they took Ted Bundy to the dentist to get those impressions, he fought. He knew it was over. Regardless if the science was there and if those matched, it was the point to me that made the biggest thing is that he knew that he had bit some of his victims.
Oh yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
He knew he was sunk.
Yeah, that if this is allowed, I'm done. Now, if it did match or not, I'm not there to argue it. I just found it educational from the point that he was not happy and he put up a fuss because he knew he bit some of his victims.
Right. So on a September afternoon in 2000, you guys, a man named Richard Green was shot and wounded in his neighborhood south of Boston. And about a year later, police found a loaded pistol in the yard of a nearby house. And a detective with the Boston police department fired the gun multiple times in a lab and compared the minute grooves and scratches that the firing pin and the interior of the gun left on its cartridge casings with those discovered on casings found at the crime scene. They matched, he would later say at a pre-trial hearing, and to the exclusion of every other firearm in the world. The detective's findings might have bolstered federal racketeering charges for 2 alleged gang members implicated in various crimes on that street, but the defendant's lawyers challenged its admissibility, and the patterns on the cartridges from the lab weren't identical to those from the crime scene, they pointed out. So how could the detective be sure that the shots hadn't been fired from another gun? Well, the short answer is, if you ask any statistician, is that he couldn't. There was some unknown chance that a different gun struck a similar pattern, but for decades, forensic examiners have sometimes claimed in court that close but not identical ballistic markings could conclusively link evidence to a suspect, and judges and juries have trusted that expertise. Examiners have made similar statements for other forms of so-called pattern evidence, such as fingerprints, shoe prints, tire tracks, and bite marks. But such claims are ill-founded. A committee at the National Academy of Sciences concluded in 2009. No forensic method has been rigorously shown to have the capacity to consistently and with a high degree of certainty demonstrate a connection between evidence and a specific individual or source, the panel wrote. In other words, judges and juries were sometimes sending people to jail based on bogus science. Sorry. Hello. Why did I just do that? I didn't mean to do that. Oh, come on, you guys. Move up. Okay, now this is not funny. Why is this? There we go. There we go. When somebody tells you, I think this is a match or not a match, they ought to tell you an estimate of the statistical uncertainty about it. Konstantin Gatsanis from Brown University is a statistician, and that's his quote, and he firmly believes that. In 2016, NIST awarded $20 million to a team of about 30 statisticians and legal professionals to help develop tools for analyzing the strength of an apparent match, called the Center for Statistics and Applications in Forensic Evidence, or CSAFE. It will collaborate with NIST statisticians to develop statistical methods that describe how strongly a shoe print in the dirt links the owner of a certain pair of sneakers to a crime scene. For example, or how many fingerprints other than the suspects might have left a similar pattern on a murder weapon. Chime in, my dear.
I am the greatest comment I think I've ever seen in chat was just made in your chat.
Oh, really?
Yes.
What was it?
Triple S.
Oh, 90% of statistics are made up on the spot. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. If anybody, I mean, I've taken statistics. So if anybody takes a statistics class, statistics are only as good as statistics. You can make them say whatever you want them to say.
Well, Triple S just made a statistic of 90% of all.
Yeah, there you go. So the group is staring down a problem of immense complexity. Pattern evidence has historically relied on the trained eyes and subjective judgments of human examiners, not on rigorous statistical analysis. It's not known how much variation exists in the world's population of shoes, guns, or fingerprints, or just how much similarity between two patterns is enough to suggest a common source. I know some people think we are not going to be able to do this. You cannot put a probability on some types of evidence, says Alicia Karqueri, a statistician at Iowa State University in Ames who heads CSAFE. And they might be right, but we certainly need to try. And how strong is the resemblance between those fingerprints? Many statisticians aim to express the strength of forensic evidence as a likelihood ratio, which contrasts the probability of observing a given pattern under different scenarios. This model, under development by researchers at South Dakota State University, used two large databases to evaluate similarities between fingerprints. So,
let me tell you about the fingerprint identification system.
okay.
What you see on TV is not the way it happens.
Imagine that.
that fingerprint popped up there, and it absolutely. Now it may have changed over the years since the last time I ran a fingerprint, but in the advancements that we had, is that when you put that fingerprint in there came back a list of fingerprints, maybe the top 100 or top 1,000 fingerprints that met certain criteria of what you was looking for. Now your matching fingerprint is in there. More than likely, it may be the first one, or it may be the 34th one. It's in there, but it's not always that top one. It's not that top 5 sometimes. It may be in the top 20. And sometimes it may be that top one, but it's not what you see on TV is not the way it works.
I'm sure. Hang on a second. The committee's report sent shockwaves through the legal system, and forensic science is now grinding toward reform. A series of expert working groups assembled by the National Institute of Standards and Technology, or NIST, and the Department of Justice has begun to gather and endorse standards for collecting and evaluating different kinds of evidence. What is needed, says Konstantin Gastonis, a statistician at Brown University who chaired the NAS committee, is statistical rigor. When somebody tells you, I think that this is a match or not a match, they ought to tell you an estimate of the statistical uncertainty about it. So many forensic disciplines have been plagued with high-profile errors. An ongoing review of the Federal Bureau of Investigation, FBI's microscopic hair comparisons, in which forensic scientists look for distinguishing features such as the thickness, texture, and pigment in a hair strand, has revealed erroneous statements in more than 90% of cases before 2000 in which the FBI examiners gave testimony. Often, analysis said that hair could be associated with a specific person, which hair analysis cannot prove. At least 5 of the cases reviewed so far ended in convictions, later reversed with DNA evidence. I would think that hair comparison would be more subjective, but if you have a hair follicle attached to the end of it, of that hair, that's definitive because you get the DNA.
The nuclear DNA off of that, yes.
Yes. So the analysis of bite mark patterns has been shown to be so weak scientifically that a state commission in Texas recently recommended banning it from the courtroom. In one high-profile case, a man named Ray Crone was convicted of murder after prosecutors used bite marks on the victim's neck and breast to link Crone to the crime. He served 10 years in prison before DNA evidence showed that he was innocent. Even more established methods such as fingerprint comparison have faced criticism. Many fingerprint analysis use standard procedures to mark different levels of detail in a suspect's fingerprint and in a latent print left at a crime scene, but making a so-called individualization or a conclusion that the prints are from the same source is where it gets a little fuzzy, says Glenn Langenberg, a forensic scientist and fingerprint examiner at the Minnesota Bureau of Criminal Apprehension in St. Paul. After examiners look at enough prints known to be from the same source and from different sources, their brain gets calibrated to some internal threshold of similarity, he says. The fuzziness shows in their findings. One study of 169 fingerprint examiners found 7.5% false negatives, in which examiners concluded that 2 prints from the same person came from different people, and 0.1% false positives, where 2 prints were incorrectly said to be from the same source. When some of the examiners were retested on some of the same prints after 7 months, they repeated only about 90% of their exclusions and 89% of their individualizations. Testing examiner accuracy using known samples can give the judge or jury a sense of general error rates in a field, but it cannot describe the level of uncertainty around a specific piece of evidence. Right now, only DNA identification includes that measure of uncertainty. DNA analysis are based on 13 genetic variants, or I hate this word, alleles. They are statistically independent and known to vary widely among individuals. Mixtures of genetic material from multiple people can complicate the analysis, but DNA profiling is a relatively easy statistical problem to solve, says Nicholas Petreco, an applied mathematician at the City University of New York's John Jay College of Criminal Justice in New York City. Pattern evidence doesn't operate under the same rules as DNA, he says. What's an allele on a tool mark? What's an allele on a hair or fiber? How do you feel about that?
Oh man, the hardest class I ever went and took, and most intense class, was fingerprinting. And it is true that fingerprints are so not that either it is or it isn't the person, and you have to look at so much. There's not a predetermined number of how many identifying characteristics of bifurcation, ridge endings, islands, whatever. As you look at that fingerprint and see the identifying characteristics and the ridge counts between the two, the distancing, the spacing, the stretch, because skin stretches, that as you identify it is extremely tough. And some people can do it, some people can't. And it's when you go and you reduce the number of characteristics identifiable that is the problem, because they don't say it's only that you have to have at least 7, which basically I would never identify a fingerprint unless I was up there in the double digits, for the fact that to absolutely, and I was in a case that at some point in my life I will talk about, not tonight, of the fingerprint and a big fight that happened over a fingerprint that occurred. And so it's so tough on fingerprints, and you better have your ducks in a row when you decide that you're going to send a person to jail, that you don't do it haphazardly, and you better have everything right. And yeah, I'm an advocate for fingerprints if they're done by a qualified individual. If there's somebody that just wants to say, okay, I have 3 identifiers, that's him. No, that ain't the way you do it.
Awesome. Great. I love it. And I can't wait to hear your story someday.
It'll probably be one of my final shows. Because the way that it was addressed and the way they talked about it, that if such a revelation was made, that it would bring distrust upon a lab technician. And that ain't the way it should be. If the lab technician is wrong, he's wrong.
Exactly. So what not to say in a courtroom? Several phrases often used to describe similarities in evidence are falling out of favor as statisticians begin to influence examiners and judges. to a reasonable degree of scientific certainty, a customary way to express the strength of scientific testimony that has zero meaning, says Carnegie Mellon University in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, statistician Stephen Feinberg, a member of the U.S. National Commission on Forensic Science, which is urging the legal community to abandon this phrase. It's a match, a misleading fixture of TV crime dramas. The correct testimony is, I've looked at these two things and they look similar, says Brandon Garrett, a law professor at the University of Virginia in Charlottesville. There is a 0% error rate. Never true, says Alicia Karaquiri, a statistician at Iowa State University in Ames. There's always a chance, even if it's infinitesimal, that there's a different explanation for your evidence. Identification versus individualization. Often used in fingerprint analysis, these terms too imply absolute certainty of the conclusion. The U.S. Army's Defense Forensic Science Center explained last year when it announced that it will no longer use them. So, to estimate how frequently a given feature occurs in pattern evidence, researchers will need large databases. Karaquiri and her C-SAFE colleagues will begin by exploring digital collections such as images of bullets, casing marks assembled by the NIST researchers, and one of the world's largest collections of crime scene shoe prints kept by the Israeli police force. The team must also decide what aspects of an image are relevant for comparison. For example, sole patterns indicating the brand and model of a shoe may not be as informative for a comparison as acquired characteristics such as damage or wear patterns. A large database and a set of rules for feature selection could then feed a statistical model that describes how unusual the set of similarities between two samples really is, relative to similarities between two randomly selected samples from the population. Ideally, says Karaquiri, the model would produce a likelihood ratio that would allow an examiner to say, for example, that the similarities between two fingerprints are 10,000 times more likely to occur if they came from the same finger than if they came from different ones. For fingerprints, that kind of assessment seems within reach. A model under development by forensic scientist Cedric Newman and statistician Christopher Saunders at the South Dakota State University in Brookings can estimate a likelihood ratio for prints once a trained examiner marks their similarities. The approach still isn't quite ready for use in court, says Newman, in part because it results vary too widely depending on which features an examiner selects as relevant. Tighter standards for examiners could resolve these problems. For other types of evidence, the approach may never work, some scientists say. For instance, a relevant database of shoe prints might not be practical, says Leslie Hammer, a forensic scientist in Anchorage, Alaska, who specializes in footwear and tire track analysis. The database would have to keep up with an ever-changing market of brand name and counterfeit products, document distinctive features like wear or damage patterns, and possibly even account for regional variations in shoe frequency, the likelihood of a snow boot turning up in Hawaii versus North Dakota, for example. What statisticians manage to compute with their new models will have little value if forensic examiners, jurors, judges, and lawyers don't know how to interpret statistical claims. And that's why C-SAFE collaborator Brandon Garrett, a law professor at the University of Virginia in Charlottesville, has begun to study how jurors perceive a forensic examiner's testimony. And I think this is where things can get really interesting, because everybody knows that every jury has a different outlook or experience or whatever, however you want to look at it when they're looking at evidence. No juror sees the evidence the same. In a 2013 study, for instance, online participants had to rate the likelihood of a defendant's guilt in a hypothetical robbery based on different kinds of testimony from a fingerprint examiner. It didn't seem to matter whether they were simply told that a print at the scene matched or was individualized to the defendant, or whether the examiner offered further justification. The chance of an error is so remote that it is considered to be a practical impossibility, for example. In all those cases, jurors rated the likelihood of guilt at about 4.5 on a 7-point scale. As a lawyer, I would have thought the specific wording would have mattered more than it did, Garrett said, but if subjects were told that the print could have come from someone else, they seemed to discount the fingerprint evidence altogether. What's that tell you, Steve?
First off, when they're talking about similar fingerprints on individuals, I've never seen that occur. That was way back several paragraphs before.
You've never seen that occur?
No, that you have similar fingerprints from different fingers on the same individual. Never seen that. You may have fingerprints that might be loops or whorls, which is just a classification of a fingerprint, but they're not similar in any other way. They don't have the same distances between certain characteristics that are identifiable of the print.
Right.
Yeah, it may be a whorl, but it's not a. And for people that want to look it up, it's WHIRL, and or a loop type of fingerprint. But some of these people that are trying to set up, and who in the world sets up a 7-point scale?
Yeah, I wondered about that too. I was like, what? When Newman and his colleagues tested out their fingerprint likelihood ratios on mock jurors, participants recognized that making an identification was fundamentally different from providing a probability statement, but they didn't seem to distinguish between a strong likelihood ratio, 1 in 100,000, and a weaker one, 1 in 1,000, when estimating the probability that a suspect was the source of a print. Newman suspects that numbers can still be useful for describing testimony, but that lawyers and cognitive psychologists will have to team up to figure out the best presentation. The final decision about what kind of statements jurors can ponder is up to judges, who often confer with the lawyers and forensic examiners to decide what evidence is admissible. CSAFE aims to reach all these players through a campaign to boost statistical literacy. Last week, the statisticians conducted training for practitioners across Florida crime labs at the Palm Beach County Sheriff's Office, and they intend to launch similar courses around the United States. Now, some judges are already pretty savvy about statistics. In the Boston racketeering case that I told you about earlier, Federal District Court Judge Nancy Gertner found the detective's conclusion that only one gun on the entire planet could have produced the imprints on the bullet cartridges preposterous. She believed the evidence should have been excluded completely, but Gertner, who's now a professor at Harvard University, feared that an appeals court would reverse that move, so she reluctantly ruled that the detective could describe ways in which the bullet casings looked similar, but not conclude that they came from the same pistol. Ultimately, a juror said there was no evidence of a racketeering operation, and Gertner cleared the defendants of the more serious federal charges, and their cases were moved to state court. What's troubling, Gertner says, is that when the judge accepts junk science, an appeals court will rarely overrule them. Attaching a numerical probability to evidence, as CSAFE hopes to do, would certainly be interesting, but even a standard practice of critically evaluating evidence would be a step forward. the pattern now is that the judge who cares about these issues are enforcing them, and the judges who don't care about these issues are not. To protect against the use of such junk science in the courtroom, the United States Supreme Court issued a series of rulings in the 1990s known as the Daubert Trilogy. They instruct trial courts to act as gatekeepers so as to only allow relevant and reliable scientific evidence to be presented to a jury. Forensic science is a critical element of the criminal justice system. Forensic scientists examine and analyze evidence from crime scenes and elsewhere to develop objective findings that can assist in the investigation, prosecution of perpetrators of crime, or absolve an innocent person from suspicion. And forensic scientists use various techniques to accurately recreate and establish the order of events that led to a crime. The physical evidence, meticulously gathered through applying the scientific method, is then used in the court of law to prove someone's innocence or guilt. Forensic science contributes to erroneous convictions when analysts provide invalid testimony at a trial or when such evidence fails to correct false crime theories. Moreover, while international forensic misconduct certainly does exist, the effects of confirmation biases may present a greater threat to forensic analysis. Studies have demonstrated that some forensic methods used in criminal investigations cannot consistently produce accurate results. Bite mark comparison is an example of an analysis that is unreliable and inaccurate. So there you go, you guys. That was what I put together for us.
Well, if you go by what number-wise, then the only science that she accepts is DNA.
Yeah.
Because currently, that's the only one I know of that has that. And so everything else is going to be thrown out if you allow that mentality of word salad or whatever that she gets to declare everything. And I don't agree with that.
I don't either. Because I feel like the sad thing that's happened with this, everybody, in my opinion, and I'm up there in age. I'm old and I'm old school. And when we were taught about science and we were showed the scientific method, we believed in science and we didn't question science. It was science. And as science evolves and we continue to learn, and it's the same thing as when we're looking at our health and diseases and things like that and how we've come so far with science. You have to believe and trust to get anywhere. If you don't have that faith and trust in those that are producing the evidence of the value of whether it be a diagnosis or whether it be a treatment plan or whatever for your sickness or ailment, look where we would be. Open heart surgery is an example because people who had all of these ailments with their heart for years, before open heart surgery was a thing, they died. And now we have people where they are actually doing open heart surgery now where they don't have to crack the chest. They absolutely do not have to crack that chest bone, breastbone open, and they can do it with much more precision and less invasive techniques. And they are honing those skills every single day. That's science. That's technology at work. And the same thing happens in forensic science. And for those naysayers that want to sit out there and say, well, this forensic science is, it's really not something that you can rely on and you really can't, that scares the hell out of me because those people are creating a sense of distrust in something that we have trusted for so long. You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah.
And I think that is where I'm at with it because we're not just talking about court cases and forensic science. We're talking about science in general. And Maria's right. Science deniers are scary people. I don't understand when you have, we all took science in school. And if you listened and you learned scientific theory, you know, you have to prove it. You have to prove it.
Mm-hmm. I mean, on this recent beating of these officers out there, we only have one camera. Are there other cameras out there that might show a different view? Or is that what they're saying, that we should deny our lying eyes from that one camera? That, oh, there's 10 cameras from a greater distance that show these officers, you can't see what they're doing. Should we take that and only, I mean, it's absolutely ridiculous that we don't allow people to think and evaluate what a professional is telling them. And if you believe the opinion of a, you know, if you're looking at a fingerprint and there's 15 points of identification that says this is a fingerprint, you bring in another expert and he says, well, here's 16 points that says it's not him. Then you take those 16 points. And it's not junk science on the fingerprints. I don't know where and why they're even including fingerprints.
Yeah, I thought that was absolutely crazy when I saw it as well. And I thought, but I feel the same way even about tire mark or tire treads. They have gotten so good. They have a huge database somewhere of tires.
Yeah, they can tell you the manufacturer of the tire, and then you go in there. It's just not that similar. Tire tracks, that there's a million tires made with the same tread design, but the wear pattern and the marks, the characteristics of it are different.
Exactly. And when you look at that and examine it, you know, these tire experts, I mean, I've watched these experts on the stand, and when they're up there and they're describing the evidence and why they feel you know, or came to the conclusion that they came to, they may look at a tire impression and know immediately what brand of tire it is, if it's something that is widely used on certain types of cars, which I think that can be said, you know, that there are certain brands of tires that are very widely used on passenger vehicles in this country. And it's not like there's thousands of them. So they can look at those tires and say, oh, I think this might be a Michelin, or I think this might be a Goodyear, or I think this might be something else. And then they go to the lab and they look at it and they find out that they were right in that. But how do they determine if that car that may have a Michelin tire on it or a Goodyear tire on it is the one that actually made that tire impression? Just like you said, it comes down to wear and tear and comparing that tread that's in the whatever they casted to that tire. And I think it would be something to easily be seen. To me, that makes sense.
Well, and I don't know if they still do it, but used to, all our state inmates issued shoes with tracking marks on them, so that if we're tracking an individual that went through a certain area, we knew if it was a state issued shoe because it had tracking marks.
See? And you know, and it's the same. I mean, I watched I think it was a Forensic Files a few days ago, and there was barefoot. There was footprint evidence because the person who committed the murder took their shoes off thinking, I'm not going to get my shoe print, but they ended up stepping in blood with their bare foot.
We wouldn't even have mattered because possibly just a regular, just like fingerprints, footprints have natural secretion of oils and things that might have led to that. And regardless, so
but they caught this person based on their footprint, because we all have footprints, just like we have fingerprints.
Absolutely, palm prints.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm like, this, you know, the whole, I don't know, this whole mindset of I know at least in the last 5 years, where everybody thinks science is just bunk. has me really upset. And I guess it's because I've always been a believer in science, with a medical background and that I have, and my whole view on science as a whole. I just can't throw it all out the window, and I just don't see how people can. But with that being said, um, I don't think that any of what we talked about tonight, as far as fingerprints, ballistics, shoe prints, bite marks, any of that, I don't believe any of that is junk science.
Well, like I said, they're always going to have it, and I can't argue for the fact that we should have the discussion, because it will guarantee in the future that the sciences are held to a higher standard. I appreciate their input. I don't agree with it, but it should be open for debate, and we have to have these radicals both on each side, and somewhere in the middle will be the truth, and we have to have that debate.
Right. I mean, and I understand that too, but there comes a point where you have to say enough's enough.
I've never been in an argument that there wasn't at least one fool involved.
I hear you. I hear you on that. I hear you. Well, like I said, it really gets me, because I keep hearing with Delphi and Richard Allen, everybody's like, they don't have any evidence, and they can't use that bullet to prove anything, or they can't use that casing to prove anything. And I'm like, they already have. That's one of the things that got them the arrest in this case. They are, and it's the totality of the evidence. It's not just one piece of evidence that convicts. It's the totality. When they get their jury instruction from the court, it will be the totality of the evidence. Does it prove beyond a reasonable doubt? Not just one piece up here, or what you decide to pick out of what you heard. That is not how jury instruction works. And you can't just say, well, I believe all this other stuff, but I don't think this works, so I'm not going to consider this. And you can't do that. It's the totality of the evidence.
Yeah. By my mere presence on your show tonight, I stopped you from coughing. So I obviously am the cure. And that is not junk science.
You are the cure. I haven't coughed once since you came on.
That's not, it's proven. It's proven.
That is absolute proven science right there. I'm going to tell my doctor, I know exactly what I need for my asthma. It's Steve.
Yeah.
He's my cure.
That's it.
That is. It's very true. How's Mrs. Steve, by the way? She doing okay?
Well, she was helping tonight, but she's off on the side, and she didn't want the comfort for us to make where she was comfortable. She had to be off camera, because in front of the bat phone behind me is not anywhere to rest her arm. And but she's doing better. I think it's like 7 weeks before she have full use.
Okay, so you're taking good care of her, I know.
Well, actually, in about 6 hours, I'm leaving for Indiana. I'm heading up. I've got to go work on one of the cold cases, get some information, and head to Texas in a few weeks, probably, or just as soon as we had a great meeting with a geophysicist this week about looking for cold case victims that are buried.
Awesome.
Yeah.
That's really good. Well, I'm glad that you're heading up here again.
Absolutely.
That's awesome. It's going to be cold. You know that, right? Bring your long johns.
Oh yeah. It's just a day or two. I'm not going to be there long.
Okay.
Got to do an interview and gather some information, and then see if I can't find some property owners and get permission to do what we want to do.
Because we're supposed to get the polar vortex. So you're going to want to head back to Georgia before that happens. Late in the week, I think, though, is when it's supposed to happen. So you might make it out of here if you're only staying a couple days. So what, you've had your shows on this, and you've talked about this so much about the forensics, with the spent, or the unspent casing, and the likelihood of how is that going to be dealt with by the defense? How's he
Well,
going to explain that away? What are you telling people who come at you and say, because I can't tell you how many emails I get where people say, Kristen, talk about the bullet and how that's not going to be relevant.
well,
Especially since this defense team supposedly has had that sort of evidence thrown out before. So
well, I worry about that for the fact that it depends if they have what type of expert that will be representing the prosecution and getting them qualified, because it's going to be a high standard for any expert to be recognized, both for the prosecution and for the defense. But we will know more. I don't know how many characteristics they have on that bullet, and we won't know until either the court allows it or doesn't. And if they don't allow that bullet, that will be a major blow to the case.
yes, Maria, they have. She just asked, did I say the defense team has gotten bullet mark forensics thrown out of a trial before? Yes. Yes, they have.
Yeah. And that may have been due to the person that was presenting the evidence. What was their background? What was their training? The expert I saw in South Carolina was exemplar. I mean, he was part of the studies that created some of the science. So hopefully Indiana has that also, that they will be bringing somebody that is fully, has the experience, the background, and that can testify to the level that it's going to take. Because I understand, if either it's a match or it's not. And until I see the evidence myself,
right.
I don't
Well,
know.
I can't believe in my mind that it's not a match, or they would definitely not have used it in their
Well, and match is not the right word. It's the opinion of the expert.
Exactly. There we go again. It isn't a match. It's the opinion of the person who looked at the evidence that it came from his weapon. That is what he said. So
And,
yeah, it's like I feel I do feel confident, and I think
well, I feel confident for the fact that I feel confident from his own inclusion of the case.
Yes.
That's of when he put himself on that bridge,
right,
wearing the clothes
wearing the
he
clothes
says he was wearing.
Yes.
And we have a witness that supports him and says, yeah, I saw him on that first platform.
Exactly.
And I turned around, and within a few hundred feet, I met the two girls walking towards him.
So who else could have possibly, in that short of an amount of time, replaced him from being the guy on the bridge with the girls? It's just, to me, that's,
And so he denies seeing them.
Yeah. It goes to the totality of the evidence, and we don't know what all they have. They didn't tell us everything in that document.
His own admission is huge. His own admission of being there is huge evidence, and his denial of certain facts is huge.
Yeah.
And I don't know how he will overcome. And people, as I spoke before, have been found guilty by the facts that he's presented against himself.
I don't know, Maria, if Tech Death is still in here, but I think he knows the case, or he knows about it, because one of the attorneys, and I don't know which one it was, had a case recently in Indianapolis, I believe, or somewhere in Indiana, where they got that forensic ballistic evidence not admissible. And it does happen. It's not something, it's like Steve said, it does happen. And it's based on evidence, or they're experts. And if the court doesn't believe that these people are experts or expert enough in what they're trying to do, they won't allow them to testify, because it can be bad for the defendant. It can be bad for the state and the case. And they don't want their case overturned on appeal. So they look at all of that stuff as they're allowing the admissibility of evidence, according to the law, of course. I mean, they can't just, pick and choose, but yeah, I'm so glad you jumped on here with me tonight.
Well, like I said, the only cure I knew that could solve it was me being on the show.
I'm like, and when you said that and I was crying, I was like, tears coming out my eyes. I'm like, all I saw was Steve said, "Do you need me? Send me a link." I was like, yes, I need you. I always need you.
Well, like I said, Mrs. Steve will be cured in record time. Just by, it's not junk science.
There you go. You tell her. It's just you just have the touch. That's all there is to it.
I'm the good nurse in the positive, not the good nurse movie that they just made about.
Yeah. Did you watch that?
I did.
Wow. Wow.
Mrs. Steve was getting prepped for surgery, and I said, I told her, I said, "Babe, don't worry about it. I've already checked the IV, and no one has injected anything in your IV."
That's nice of you.
And that's what she told me. She said, I appreciate knowing that.
Exactly.
I said, well, that's what we do.
God love you.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. At least you had her best interest at heart.
Yeah. But anyway, I'm gonna get ready to go. I'm gonna lay down for 4 or 5 hours, and then I'm gonna go.
Be safe driving up here, okay?
Oh, absolutely. I normally don't go to bed until 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, and I get up at 8, so I only sleep about 4 hours a night, 4 or 5 hours a night anyway. And so
I'm night owl. I know you're a night owl.
I am.
I
know
you
a cup
are.
Of coffee and I'm ready to go. And but you take care. You get feeling better, and take whatever it takes to get you from coughing. We don't want to see that. We want the best for you.
I appreciate that, and same to you, my dear friend. And you be safe coming up here. And I can't wait to find out more about what's going on with your cases up here.
Oh yeah. I'm looking forward to it. And like I said, we had some great meetings this week, and I'm looking forward to getting out there. Doesn't mean that we're going to find anything, but we have to try.
Good. Well, good night, sir. Get some rest. Tell Mrs. Steve we love her.
Will do.
Okay. Bye-bye. He's the greatest, you guys. Seriously. I mean, seriously, really? He just, he had just done his own show, and he wasn't planning on coming on with me, and he just jumped on here, and he has the biggest heart. I just love him to death. I cannot say enough about him. And, yeah. No, Maria, I've known about this since right after they announced the attorneys. I'm not too concerned about it. Honestly, I'm just not. I'm going into this trial with as much positivity as I possibly and absolutely can, because I don't want to think about it any other way. So I'm praying that Nick McClellan knows what he's doing and will, have the experts that he needs. And so, and we'll go from there. He does have good insights. I love the fact that he can tell us his point of view from when he was actually doing the jobs, because he was CSI. He did the forensics. He not only did, the beat cop stuff and the detective work and the whole ball of wax, he did it all. So he's a really good person to have. And he lays it out so well. So it's really good. And I just appreciate everyone. I appreciate you all hanging in there with me tonight. I'm sorry that it started out a little rough. But he's right. I didn't even think about it. I mean, even when I was doing the presentation, I didn't even think about coughing, not even once. So he just calms me down, because I haven't coughed all day until I got on camera. You guys make me nervous, I guess. I don't know. But yeah, make sure you guys, if I think everybody that's in here watching knows who True Crime Web is, but please go over, if you don't, and support his channel. Make sure you subscribe, give him a thumbs up, he's got some amazing content, and you know, go check out True Crime Maria. She's got great content. I love her to death. I can't say enough about her. She is an amazing content creator. We're going to start seeing some new stuff from her, and I'm really excited about that. And he doesn't verbal. That's the other thing. You will never feel stupid when you talk to Steve, because, you know, he always will answer your questions. He's just that kind of guy, and never make you feel like you're asking something stupid. So, and that's wonderful. Triple S, I'm so glad to have you here. Thank you so much. You are so welcome to be here, and we're very happy that you're here. But yeah, Steve and I have a mutual respect for each other. And yeah, he's one of the best. He's one of the best. So thanks you guys for being here. Everyone who stuck with me all night, thank you again. I hope everyone has a good rest of their weekend. Enjoy the football tomorrow, you guys. The Super Bowl's coming soon. So just a few more games and we'll know who's going to be the Super Bowl teams this year. So if you're into that thing, you know, enjoy that tomorrow with your friends and family. Oh, hi, Mitzi Scott. I'm so glad that you're here. I am so glad you're here. Thank you, guys. And yeah, Melissa's like, go 49ers. So, yeah. Have a good weekend, everyone. And I'll see you guys all on Tuesday. Be safe out there. And whenever you can, please be kind. Good night, everyone.